Hey BookTube. After a while, I'm going to continue my shelf tour. So this is part 4. I did parts 1 to 3 on my black bookcase, and this will be part 4. This is a much larger shelf, if only because of the way the shelves are aligned, and so I can fit quite a bit more books on the shelf. And so not only do I have an enormous stack in front of the books on the main shelf, I also have a second layer of books stacked on the double layered onto the shelf itself. So we have a set of books here and a set of books here, all stacked vertically. So we're going to go through all that, and the theme for this shelf is all classics from the late medieval period to the Renaissance, through the Renaissance all the way to around Milton's time. So that'll be a rough time period here, and as you can guess, Milton will be on the shelf. So we're going to start with the books in front of the shelf that are stacked sideways, and we start off with Oxford World's Classic, La Fontaine's Selected Fables. This is a new translation by Christopher Wood, and I quite like these smaller older Oxford editions. They always have really good binding, or at least I found they've had good binding, though I've heard others say otherwise. And then this edition in particular has the tales in translation, but they have the original on this side here. So we have the French on this side, and then we have the original on this side. And so that's this edition. And then we have Boccaccio's Decameron in the same format, though this is just fully an English edition. There's no Italian in this one, and this is translated by Guidi Waldman, so Guido. I don't know how to pronounce that Italian name. Waldman, with an introduction and notes by Jonathan Usher. So nice fat little mass market, and actually quite small text. So that's the Decameron, and then we come to the more modern Oxford look. We got Dante's Divine Comedy. This is translated by C.H. Sisson with introduction and notes by David Higgins. And then we have Chaucer's Trillius and Crisiad. This is a new translation by Barry Windiet. And I got this one brand new, and I was very disappointed in this. I haven't read it myself, but I was disappointed in the formatting. So if you know Chaucer, he wrote it in like a Middle English dialect, and that's what I was hoping I was getting with this, or not the Middle English, but I was hoping at least I was getting the poem itself in a translation. But this is not only translated. This is not only a translation of that Middle English, but it's in prose. So it's not only the translation makes it removed from Chaucer, but now the formatting makes it even further removed. And for someone like Chaucer, that upsets me more than it would be for, say, a translation of Homer, or a translation of, I don't know, a Roman poet in prose. So, thank goodness I rectified that later on this shelf, as we will see. Well, I might as well just pull it off now. It's further off on the shelf. We have the Norton edition of Trillius and Crisiad. This is edited by Stephen Barney, and this is the Norton Critical. This has the original on this side, so Chaucer's actual Middle English, and then we have just the glossary there. And then one of the weirdest editorial decisions in Norton I've seen is that on this side is the inspiration for Chaucer, which is the Il Filostrato by Boccaccio. And even though that is a weird editorial decision to have him facing page like this all throughout, I'm in a way strangely glad for it, because this is the only English translation, I believe, of the Filostrato that's available in stores these days. So, I mean, weird decision. Also, weird to have it facing page instead of having maybe the Filostrato on the back as a part of the appendix. But anyways, I'll take it. And we move on to the spiritual exercises of Saint Ignatius. This is Saint Ignatius's profound precepts of mystical theology, and this is translated by Anthony Motola with an introduction by Robert W. Gleason. And I believe this is one of the founding documents of the Jesuits, the Catholic sect there. So I don't know a ton of this, other than this is considered a classic in the Christian canon. So, or at least in the canon outside the Bible, of course, but like in the spiritual classics. And same with the next book. Actually, this is the Imitation of Christ, and this is translated by Aloysius Croft and Harold Bolton. And I'm not even gonna try and pronounce the name there. And then we come to an anthology. This is the Elizabethan poetry anthology. So this is edited by Bob Blaisdell. And I picked this up because it has a lot of poets in here that I wouldn't know otherwise. Even though it goes past Queen Elizabeth's time period, because it's got John Donne in here. But yeah, Anne Askew, Barnaby Barnes, Richard Barnfield, John Davies, Thomas Deloney, Edward Dyer, John Fletcher, Barnaby Googe. Some great names that I'd never heard of, and you probably would never encounter their work in any other work than an anthology like this. And then we come to the books that are stacked in front of the, that are vertical in front of the shelf. So we come to the Heptameron by Marguerite de Navarre, basically a French version of Boccaccio's Decameron. This is the Penguin edition, translated with an introduction by P.A. Chilton. So there's that. I've read almost none of these, so I'll make, because this shelf has probably been one of the shelves to grow the most on in my library, so I've been accumulating books more on the shelf than I've been reading them. And then come to William Tyndale next. This is The Obedience of a Christian Man. Edited with notes, introduction and notes by David Daniel. And then we come to a modern library edition. This is The Travels of Marco Polo. And it's edited and revised from William Marsden's translation by Manuel Komroff and introduced by Jason Goodwill. So lots of editorializing going on here. And one thing I've heard of is that The Travels of Marco Polo are basically an editing nightmare, so having more translations and more editions of this work will probably give you many different versions of the work itself, because once the book existed and was circulating around, people did not hesitate to just add their own tales to it, because it was basically an adventure text that people took liberties with. And then we come to another enormous religious classic. This is The Institutes of Christian Religion by John Calvin, and this is in 2 volumes. Volume 1 and Volume 2 with the exact same cover. And in 2 volumes, this is done by Erdman's Press, and it's in 2 volumes. I imagine this will be extremely boring to read, but it's extremely influential, so sometimes you just gotta go right through, and if you want to read the influential texts, then you just gotta read boring, something that is boring. So, and even if it is for how many? Well, the second volume is almost 700 pages. The first volume is almost 600 pages, so over 1,000 pages of boring religious prose. At least I assume it's boring. Maybe I'm wrong. And then we come to an author who is not known to be boring. This is Erasmus's Praise of Folly and Other Writings. This is selected, translated, and edited by Robert M. Adams. Nice Norton edition here. And what are the other writings in this thing? I don't imagine that there's a whole lot else in a slim volume like this. Praise of Folly, The Complaint of Peace, 2 forwards to the Latin translation of the New Testament, Julius Excluded from Heaven, and then we got selections from the colloquies, or colloquies. We got selections from his letters. So, that's this edition here. And since that wasn't enough Erasmus, I also have the Erasmus Reader here, edited by Erika Rummel. And this version is selected from the Toronto University Press Complete Works of Erasmus Translated into English project that they've been ongoing for decades already, where they're translating all of Erasmus into English and adding a bunch of scholarly material to it. And this Erasmus Reader is an anthology that they did of that stuff. When was this published? 1990, and I believe it's still going. The volumes are still going, so they haven't even completed the project yet, and it started, I believe, in the 70s. So it's been going for quite some time, as editors come and go. And then this last volume is a nice edition of Montaigne's essays, but this is volume 1 out of 3 volumes. I only have this one volume for this edition. And it had a dust jacket, but the dust jacket was falling apart, so I kept the front piece, or the front page, the cover, which is, let's see if I can see, you can actually see, it's Montaigne. And this is translated by Jacob Zeltlin, edited and translated, and this is from the 30s. So, very nice edition of Montaigne's essays there. Now we actually move to the main shelf, but the first row. So I have a lot of smaller, well, not exactly smaller, some of them are smaller, but I have a full row of books on top, and then the main shelf on the bottom. So we'll go with the row on top. And then we start off with More's Utopia, Thomas More's Utopia. And we move on to Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales. This is translated by Neville Coghill. And this I have actually read, and I gotta say, this was a bit of a disappointment. Maybe it was the time when I read this. I read this as a break when I was reading all of Proust's In Search of Lost Time. And I took a break. I believe I started Proust in September. I read through about half of In Search of Lost Time till December. And then in January, I decided to take a break and read something from a completely different register, so I read this. And I gotta say, I was disappointed in this. I felt like Coghill's translation was playing fast and loose with Chaucer himself, and that I wasn't actually getting much of Chaucer, and it felt like cheap poetry, and it didn't do anything for me, and I don't remember a whole lot of interest in this, and so I want to go back and read Chaucer, as Chaucer will show up again on this shelf. So I need to give Chaucer another try in Chaucer's own language this time, and not in that translation, though I probably will give that translation another try sometime. Moving on to the complete poems of John Donne in English. This is a nice edition because I believe half of this is editorial material, or notes. Yeah, right here. So this is all the poems in English, and then this is all critical material. Oh yeah, it's all notes on the poems, so it's a lot. Who's the editor here? A.J. Smith. A.G. Smith is the editor of this volume. Then we come to the letters of Abelard or Abelard and Heloise. And this was, this is translated by Betty Radis. So this is the letters that were passed between a monk or a teacher and a monk and the nun that was one of his best students, I believe. A nun that was one of his best students, and they fell in love, and they wrote these letters that have become famous. So, or at least, yeah, this is the letters that have become famous and have become pastiged in a lot of medieval literature in the form of romances, I believe. Then we come to another anthology. This is the Shakespearean World, monastic writings in the 12th century, which I'm not entirely sure what to expect from this. Like, it sounds like a collection of monastic writings from the Middle Ages. Sounds tedious, but I don't know. I'm going to give it a try. It's translated and edited with an introduction by Pauline Matarasso. And then we come to Castiglione's Book of the Courtier. This is translated by George Bull. And then we come to, was it Froissart's? Froissart? I'm butchering that name, I know it. And it's his Chronicles, which is translated by Geoffrey Brereton. And then we come to Cellini's Benvenuto Cellini's autobiography, which I've heard is more fiction than fact, but it's a lot of fun, so I've heard. And actually this cover is part of an artistic piece that he himself, the author of this work, created. It's a salt cellar made for Francis I. It's pretty neat. Not everyone gets to make art for their own covers. And this is another edition of Marco Polo's travels. This is translated by R.E. Latham. I kind of like that cover better. And then we come to this is what, a Modern Library edition? This is an old Viking edition. The Portable Rabelais. This is the Uninhibited Adventures of Gargantua and Pantagruel, and the lively modern version by Samuel Putnam with an introductory essay. And it's 640 pages, and it used to be $2.25. What this thing, I've looked through this book, and I believe, this is an abridged version. It says, the 4 books of Gargantua and Pantagruel are included in this volume. The only omissions are some of the archaic, obscure, and least, quote-unquote, Rabelaisian portions. In effect, the whole great work is here, with most of the text intact, and with continuity supplied for the omitted passages. So, basically, the editor omitted works that they found didn't quite work. So they polished the edges of this work in their own opinion. Imagine publishing a translation of War and Peace that was edited to get rid of some of the least Tolstoyan pieces in that translation. Think of the outrage. Anyways, moving on to another edition of Gargantua and Pantagruel. This is the Penguin edition, translated by J.M. Cohen. And I believe this is the whole thing. Yeah, this is over 600 pages. But yeah, I've got 2 editions of that. Then I'm going to move on to this side here. We have Racine, Racine, I believe is how I pronounce that. This is Phaedra and Other Plays. And I mentioned Proust here, and if you know Proust, that play, the title play here, plays an important part in certain volumes of Proust. This is translated by John Cairncross. And then we got Molaire's, was it The Miser and Other Plays? Let's see, there. And this is translated by John Wood. And the plays in here are The Miser, The Would-Be Gentleman, That Scoundrel Scapin, The Love's Best Doctor, and Don Juan. And then we have more Moliere. This is the Misanthrope, the Sicilian, the Doctor in Spite of Himself, and The Imaginary Invalid. And this is also translated by John Wood. Then we have English plays. Here we have Ben Jonson, 3 comedies, Volpone, The Alchemist, and Bartholomew Fair, edited by Michael Jameson. And then we have Jacobean Tragedies. This is edited by Gamani Salgado. This has the Revengers Tragedy, The White Devil, and The Changeling. 3 different Jacobean authors or playwrights. And then we got a couple more books stacked up on top here, and then we get to the main shelf. We got Nigel's Saga, translated with an introduction by Magnus Magnusson and Herman Pallesen. Very odd cover choice there, because it's mostly old paper. And then we come to a Modern Library hardcover. This is 18th Century Plays. And the plays in this volume, let's see, they are Cato by Joseph Addison, The Tragedy of Jane Shore by Nicholas Rowe, The Conscious Lovers by Richard Steele, The Beggar's Opera by John Gay, The Tragedy of Tragedies by Henry Fielding. This is, and then The London Merchant by George Lillo, She Stoops to Conquer by Oliver Goldsmith, and then The Rivals by Richard Brinsley Sheridan. So a collection of 8 plays. And then the next volume is also Modern Library, and it's Restoration Plays, so it's right before that other volume. And the plays in this volume are The Rehearsal by George Villiers, The Country Wife by William Wycherley, The Man of Mode by Sir George Etheridge, or Etheridge. Sorry, I was butchering that name there. And then All for Love by John Dryden, Venice Reserved by Thomas Otway, The Relapse by Sir John Vanbrugh, The Way of the World by William Congreve, and The Beau's Stratagem by George Farquhar. Lots of Georges there. The Restoration Plays. And then we have one more volume of plays, I think. Yes, this is the last volume of plays, except for one very conspicuous omission on this shelf that you will have noticed so far that will show up last. But this is the Restoration and 18th Century comedy volume, selected and edited by Scott McKillen by Norton Critical, the Norton Critical edition. So this does have a little bit of overlap with those other volumes, but yeah, let's see. The Country Wife, The Man of Mode, The Rover, The Way of the World, The Conscious Lovers, and The School for Scandal. I believe, yeah, this does have quite a bit of overlap, but I was aware of that when I was buying these volumes. It's more for the contexts that Oxford or that Norton applies for this. So they have how many pages? Yeah, they have 100 pages of contexts from all different kinds of authors, and then they've got another 100 pages or maybe 80 pages of criticism. So that's worth the price of this volume alone. And now we finally get to the main shelf, 24 minutes in. Now we have I'm going to start from the right to the left and end on a triumphant note. So we start with Ferdowsi's Shahanama. This is a beautiful Penguin edition. This is translated by... Oh man, who's the translator? It doesn't say on the cover here. Oh, on the cover here, Dick Davis. Beautiful edition. Love the feel of this, and it just flops right open. Yeah, this will be a treat to read. And then we come to another version of the Decameron, of the very eye-catching cover. The Boccaccio. This is translated by Wayne Rebhorn. But that cover is very distinctive, and when you see this on some booktubers' shelves, and you see that red dot especially, you can really tell which book it is. It is that they have on the shelf. So this is my second edition of Boccaccio, and I've not read a single one of them yet. And then we have Dante's Divine Comedy. This is my second edition of this. This is a new and revised translation. This is done by Vintage. And this is done by Steve Ellis. And then we come to Milton's Paradise Lost, as promised. This is edited by William Kerrigan, John Rumich, and Stephen M. Fallon. And I quite like this edition. This is the edition I read it in, and it has a ton of notes at the bottom, which I quite liked, and then a lot of room for annotation in the margins here. I guess you don't see any of my annotations there, but some of my annotations when I read it. Some of my annotations are funny. Because I was encountering this work with a lot of antipathy or a lot of dread. I was not looking forward to reading this because I made the mistake of exchanging with a friend where we took pictures of our bookshelves and then we chose each other's next read. And I chose my friend to read Wilkie Collins, which you think would be, which is a lighthearted, fun read, or I don't know if lighthearted, but a fun, adventurous read. And she chose this for me, Paradise Lost. And I had encountered portions of this in a university course, and I did not like it at all, because I find Milton extremely dense and obscure in his poetry. So I went into this with all the ill will in the world, intending to give it 100 pages and say I hated it and then not finish it, but I ended up loving it because I have fond memories of reading this during my summer break, just outside in the sun, and then reading large portions of this out loud to myself as I just soak in the poetry. And even for someone who's not totally into poetry or doesn't quite get poetry, though I want to be into poetry, this is one of those books that sticks in my mind as just great memories reading it. And further on in the shelf, we got Egil's Saga. This is translated by Bernard Scudder. Then we come to more Montaigne. We have the complete essays translated by M.A. Screech. Big, fat, beautiful volume. Another floppy paperback. Quite pleased with this, and I also love that cover. Then we come back to more Chaucer, and this is the Canterbury Tales, but this is the original. This is the Penguin Classic that is absolutely monstrous, with Herculean effort done by Jill Mann, who is a Chaucer scholar, if you don't know. And the book is in large text with a ton of notes, or not notes, but glossaries at the bottom to help you actually read Chaucer in the original, because this is all Chaucer in his original language, in his Middle English. And according to Steve Donahue, if you put in the work to actually read Chaucer in his original, it'll take you some time, but you can actually come to know Chaucer. And the great thing about this volume is that was the last 400 pages or so are all critical material. not in the form of essays, but yeah, right here, in the form of notes and a critical glossary, or not glossary, but the well, basically, yeah, it is a glossary. Yeah, the glossary here of words where you can go back, and yeah, the glossary is quite long. Glossary and notes all here, and then it's got about 100-page introduction, I think, or at least close to it. Yeah, the introduction is quite long. So this is the edition to have if you want to tackle Chaucer as Chaucer himself intended to be read. And then we move on to a 3-volume Penguin set that is absolutely gorgeous and that I can't wait to read. The Tales of Arabian Nights. 3 volumes done by Penguin. Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3. Let's look at their covers. Volume 1. Volume 2. Volume 3. And this is translated by Malcolm C. Lyons, and then Ursula Lyons also helped with this. And I've searched through this a bit. I have not actually read it yet or anything, but I've done my research on this, and this version has no notes, of course, or not of course, but with Penguin that's weird, right? It has no notes. I've looked at the bottom of the page and at the back. There's no notes, and there's only the one introduction that's reprinted in the same volume, or each volume, the same introductory essay. But there's also a textual history of this work that ended them taking some of the most popular Arabian tales, which are not, or which show up in later versions, but not in the more critical texts, which is what they used to translate this. So this whole version is using more critical text, which mean, but the Ursula Lyons, where she's mentioned as like an aftermath as a helping hand with translating this. She translates those popular tales in the very back. So then, once you get through the 101 tales, you get the tale of Aladdin in the very back, which is quite long and quite popular. So if you go to this trying to look for the tale of Aladdin, you have to go to the very back of the 3rd volume in order to get it. So it's almost taunting you with the story that you certainly do know, or the story that you think you know, and it's all the way buried in the back of this 3rd volume. So that'll be a lot of fun. I look forward to reading that. And then we have actually another plays that I completely forgot about. This is Marlowe's The Complete Plays, which is not actually complete because it was only after I bought this volume and looked it up to read the one thing in here that I was hoping to find in here, which is the B text, I believe, or the B text or the A text, I forgot. There's of Dr. Faustus. Because if you don't know, his famous play Dr. Faustus, there's two versions to it. There's one version that's shorter and is considered his more authentic text that he wrote, and then there's another text which is a lot longer and is considered to be heavily edited by other hands. And this volume makes the decision not to reprint that longer version, so it's not actually complete, because then that longer text, even though it's usually thought that it's not written completely by him, it's got a lot of helping hands to it, I think it should be included in a complete set of plays. So now I have to go somewhere else if I want to read that volume, because I've read the shorter version of Dr. Faustus twice already, and it's a good play, but I'm very curious about that longer text and what changes and there are, so I'll have to go somewhere else for that, which is quite annoying, considering that's a nice volume. And then we come to another double volume. Here we got Sir Philip Sidney's The Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia. This is probably his most famous work, not including, or if you maybe in contention with his essay on poetry. But this is Sir Philip Sidney. This is Arcadia, and this is the long version. So, and Oxford publishes the Old Arcadia, which is the short version. So, from my understanding, when I was looking through these editions, the Old Arcadia is the framework, the original text that he wrote of pastoral tales, which is Arcadia, which is like the term of Arcadia is usually brought up in that context of like shepherds and nymphs and flutes and like sheep and whatever, like these I'm blanking on the term, like the very poetic idealization of shepherds, and I can't think of the term. It's completely blanking on me, and I'm not gonna try because it's just gonna be terrible viewing. But anyways, this is the original text that he wrote, but he never finished it, well, he finished this version, but then later on in his life, even though he only lived into his 30s before he died, he went through the text and completely revised it, and made it more into like this grand work of literature. But he never finished it before he died. So this volume includes the entire, like, this volume is his reworking of his own work, but includes tacks on the ending from this original volume. So a lot of people, even though this is more of a whole work, this volume here is considered, or is considered the more treasured, better work of literature than the previous volume, because of it's his own livening up of his own work. So I don't know if that made any sense, but I'll leave it as that is, and then we'll 37-minute mark. We'll go to the grand finale, which is the complete works of Shakespeare by David Bevington. This is a hardcover. It's monstrous. You can see complete works of Shakespeare, and I'm quite looking forward to this. I've read probably 1/3 of Shakespeare's works already, just based off of university classes alone, but that's the end. That's my shelf. The shelf tour part 4. So we'll go on to part 5 next time. So see you then, BookTube.